Last class we learnt about the wattmeters, and at the end of the last class I talked about the induction type energy meter. Before we start learning about induction type energy meter, let me give you some more information about the meters themselves. When these analog indicating meters were made, the manufacturers, different manufacturers decided to standardize the way they make these meters, and not only that, they also decided to put some symbols on the meter, so that the moment you look at the meter scale you understand what types of meter it is, and you also get more information from these symbols. So let us look at these symbols. So if you see a symbol like this, the inverted U represents the horseshoe magnet, and the horizontal line represents the coil in a permanent magnet moving coil instrument. So if you see the symbol, you know immediately it is a PMMC meter, type meter. And obviously PMMC meters are DC meters, so you will also see the symbol that a thick line and a thin line, which means it is DC. The meter is useful only on DC, right. Then if you see this symbol, it is quite obvious. This is PMMC meter plus rectifier. So the moment I put a rectifier, it is possible for me to measure both DC and AC. So you will see the symbol, one horizontal line and an AC. So this means the meter can read both DC and AC quantities, and we already know if it is a rectifier type meter, it reads correctly only if the AC quantity is a sine wave. Okay. If you see a symbol this symbol, the manufacturer is telling you that the meter is moving ion type meter, ion type meter. Some meters of moving ion type are only for AC, and some manufacturers make it for both DC and AC. If it is only for AC, you will see only this symbol, so which means it is AC only. Of course, moving ion meters will also have AC DC, DC and AC. This symbol is electrodynamic type. Normally electrodynamic type is both AC and DC. Two more, they are not very popular. This would be thermocouple, type instrument, again it will be DC and AC. And very rarely you will see this symbol. This is electrostatic we did not look at this this particular instrument, it is normally for high voltage DC, right. You will not find the electrostatic instrument neither for high voltage AC nor for small values of AC or small values of DC, right. They are suitable only when you want to measure high voltage DC, voltages in excess of few kilovolts DC. So that is why I did not discuss, it is not very general or popular. So the first symbol that you will see on a meter would be one of these symbols to tell you what type of meter it is. Then the second symbol that you would see would be a number, something like 3.0 or 1.0. So we have this symbol followed by this symbol, and the third symbol will be the number, right. The number indicates the accuracy class of the instrument. We still have not learnt about errors in measuring instruments, so I will not deal with it right now. It tells what would be the error that you would get if you make a measurement. Whenever we make a measurement, we always have to assume that there will be errors, right. We will not measure exactly what we want to measure, and this is the accuracy class is always given in terms of percentage of full scale, right. For example, if I have a 1.0 written and it is a 100 volt meter, right. If it is 1.0, it is 100 volt full scale, then the error is plus or minus 1% of 100 volts, which is equal to plus or minus 1 volt. So the manufacturer now guarantees that if you use his 100 volt meter, your reading will never be more than plus or minus 1 volt of expected value, right. If you are reading, let us say 50 volts, he guarantees that it will be between 49 and 51, right. It could be 50.5, he does not guarantee that it is 50.5, he says if you use my voltmeter, it will give you reading within a plus or minus 1 volt of whatever reading that you take, right. That is the meaning of that number, right. Then you may have, not you will have, if it is a DC meter, you will not have this facility, but if it is an AC meter or a DC AC meter, you will see that the next is also a number 0 dot 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 50 dot 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 2000. There will be a set of numbers. I repeat, these set of numbers you will see only if the meter is also for AC, right, only for AC or both AC and DC, and sometimes you will also see an underscore on some numbers. Through this symbol or through these numbers, the manufacturer tells you that you can use the instrument on AC between DC and 2 kilohertz, right. This is something like bandwidth, but bandwidth is not a right term when we are talking about measuring instrument, because when I say bandwidth, we always mean 3 dB bandwidth, right. Please note, this is not bandwidth, okay. When I say 3 dB bandwidth, what do I mean? That at the cutoff frequency, the power level is 3 decibels below the expected level, right. So when I say 3 dB bandwidth, this is not bandwidth, because bandwidth we always say 3 dB bandwidth, which means if I have an instrument like this and this is my cutoff frequency, this is minus 3 dB level, right, that is minus 3 dB level. Then let us assume this is V naught by Vi, right, this characteristics. What is V naught by Vi at that cutoff point for minus 3 dB? So here if this is 1, this point would be 0.707, right, it will be 70.7% of the expected value. And in measurement, if I am going to read 100 volts or 70 volts, it does not make sense, right, I have 30% error. So in measurement we never call minus 3 dB as a bandwidth, right. So when the manufacturers put 2000, it is more or less within the accuracy class that you can read, right. So that is not bandwidth. And when the manufacturer puts an underscore, he tells you that he has calibrated at those values. For example, this particular meter is calibrated at 0 hertz, which means it is DC, right. He has actually checked all the ranges that he has provided on that meter on DC, and he has also checked at 50 hertz, right. So these two values he guarantees, yes, my meter will work, but he tells you you can use it up to 2 kilohertz, but you have to check yourself. If you are going to use it on 400 hertz, it is your bounden duty to check before you take measurements, right. So the underscore tells the calibration done by the manufacturer. The last, not the last, the next one you would see would be a star and a number inside the star, right. This informs the users the insulation level of the meter, right. That is the maximum voltage that the meter can tolerate, right. For example, I have a 100 milliampere full scale meter, right, and this number always in terms of kilovolts, in kilovolts, right, in so many kilovolts. So the mark that I have put there, star, I have put 0.5, which means the instrument is capable of withstanding up to 500 volts, right, but it does not really make immediate sense. For example, I have an 100 milliampere meter, right, what has voltage to do with that? I have a 100 milliampere meter, so let me put the meter here. I have a scale, a pointer, I have two terminals, right, it is a box, okay. Now this is a 100 milliampere full scale meter, and the manufacturer says it has an insulation level of 500 volts. It does not mean that I can apply 500 volts across the terminals, right, it is an ammeter. So its internal resistance will be very small. If I apply 500 volts, the current through the meter will be very large and you will spoil the meter. What he says is that any terminal of that meter with respect to the body can at the maximum go to 500 volts, right. So if I am going to use it on a table, right, I am going to put the table and connect, and let us say I connect it to a voltage source, it could be DC or AC, it does not matter, and then I connect the load, right. This voltage, right, because this voltage is going to be on this terminal as well as on this terminal, can at the maximum be 500 volts, right. It is the same with voltmeters, it is the same with wattmeter. The insulation level of the meter talks about the insulation breakdown voltage between the casing and the terminals, right. It has nothing to do with the type of meter that you have, okay. So the last one symbol you may see, you will always see this symbol, you will always see this symbol, you will always see this symbol, you may see this symbol, you will always see this symbol, right. So, let me put a tick marks on all the symbols that you would see, right. This you will see only if it is, if the meter is AC, I have already told you, and the last symbol that you may see would be an exclamatory mark, right. The last symbol that you would see would also will be an exclamatory mark. The moment you see this symbol, you will have to be very, very careful. The manufacturer says that read the instruction sheet before you use, right, because this meter can be easily spoiled if you do not take precautions. For example, we talked about taut band suspension. Taut band suspension type of meters are very sensitive to vibration, right. I take the meter and then place it like this, the taut band suspension will go, right. So, you will have to read, and he will say even if you want to place the meter, place it very slowly, right, do not hit the meter hard, okay. And another symbol you may see, right, apart from this would be either this or this or this. Again, this is not mandatory for all the meters, right. Most of the meters are assumed to be kept horizontally when you are reading, right. So, this symbol tells you that the meter must be kept vertically and read. For example, you go into a substation, right, substation you cannot bend down and read, right, substation it is on a panel, right, the meter will be vertical, okay. So, you should use in a substation only those meters which are operable in the vertical position, right. This symbol tells us that the meter has to be horizontal, and this symbol tells us the meter has to be mounted at an angle, right. If this symbol is given, the angle is also specified, let us say 45 degrees. I repeat, most of the meters that you will see this symbol may be missing, because if no such symbol is given, it is assumed that the meter is to be kept horizontally and read, right. Only if the meter is to be kept vertically or at an angle, you will see these symbols, okay. So, the moment you look at take a meter, you can immediately say everything about the meter, you do not have to go and read the manual, okay. So, this kind of symbol system is in vogue for quite a long time. Now, we come to the energy meter, induction type energy meter. In the last class we learned that if I want to find the energy, then I will have to integrate from starting from time t equal to 0 to t the power in the system, right. In DC we normally use what is known as an ampere hour meter, because voltage is constant. If I simply accumulate ampere and hours, I get the power. In AC we talk about watt hour, and we also learned that 1000 watt hour is equal to 1 unit of electrical energy, right, 1 unit of electrical energy. We also looked at it, this is 3600 kilojoules, okay. So, to do this I must integrate power. We already know if I multiply voltage and current and integrate, I get power both in DC as well as AC, right, that is what our watt meters do, okay. I have a current flowing through the current coil of the watt meter, a current proportional to the voltage flowing through the moving coil of the watt meter, and the deflection angle is proportional to the integral of the product of the moving coil current and the fixed coil current. Okay. So, we now have to have a multiplier which multiplies voltage and current, integrates to get the wattmeter, and then I need an integrator. Okay. So, this secondary integration, if you look at it, it is always done by going into the digital domain, right. So, if I want to integrate in the digital domain, all I have to do is count, right, sum up. In mathematics we call this as integration by summation, right. We simply count. So, what we do is we take a disk, right, we take a disk and then we, right, let us say this is the disk which can rotate in this direction, and then I put a counter here, right. When this disk starts rotating, this spindle starts rotating, and then each successive wheel start rotating, right. So, this will be the least, let me put in the other side. If I have divide by 10, divide by 10 and divide by 10, this will be units, this will be tens, this will be hundreds. If I have one more wheel, this will be thousands, 1000, 10, right. So, if this wheel rotates once, this will move by 1/10. If it rotates 10 times, it will move 1 time. If this wheel rotates 10 times, this will move 1 time, right. This wheel moves 10 times, this will move 1 time, and so on. So, now I have a decade counter, right, and we can, initially they made actually wheels. Now, of course, we do not make a wheel. I will talk about the mechanism which simply counts the number of revolutions made by this disk, right. So, if the wheel makes a rotation of 1 rotation every second, right, in 100 seconds I will have 100 counts, right. Now, I say now it makes 10 rotations in 1 second, in 100 seconds I will have 1000 counts, right. So, the counter simply integrates the speed of the wheel, right. If the wheel is faster, it counts faster, right. So, by making this arrangement, the integration that is required is obtained by simply counting the rotation of the wheel, right. And now all I have to do is make the rotation speed of the wheel proportional to power, right. If I make the speed of the disk proportional to power, then whatever count I get would be proportional to integral of power, right. So, to do that, the arrangement is, we have, I will remove this spindle so that we it is clear for us. We have one arrangement where I have a coil, right, with a magnetic pole piece just underneath the disk, right, and the magnetic circuit is completed by a top disk. I do not want to put the top one because then we will not be able to see the other coil that we need to put there, right. So, that is why I put it in dot lines, but it is not dotted lines, it is there, right. And we put one more coil again with a magnetic core, let me put it. So, we put one more coil we apply a voltage V, we send a current I. So obviously we call this as the current coil and this as the voltage coil or the potential coil, right. So the arrangement is that these are in I did not draw it properly, so it will be in a arc. So this will be somewhere here, this has to go here on the disc, okay. Now because of these coils, if I send a current, there would be a flux, let us say that would be the flux due to the current I, right, and there would be a second flux this is flux due to voltage V, right. Normally the disc is made of metal, generally aluminum, because aluminum is very light, so it can rotate really fast, right. If I put iron, the wheel becomes very heavy, I need lot of force to make it rotate, right. So on the aluminum wheel now there are two fluxes, the voltage coil flux and the current coil flux. So now if I have a flux going through a metallic, a conductive disc, what will happen? There would be eddy currents, right. I call this I eddy current EI, eddy current due to current coil flux, right, and I will also have eddy current due to the voltage coil flux, so this I call I eddy current V, okay. The current coil flux will also be here. If this is in this direction, this would be in the opposite direction, right, because the flux is reversed there, flux is in this direction, when flux goes there the flux direction is reversed, okay. Now what I see is on the disc I have a magnetic field, right, magnetic flux is nothing but magnetic field, all I have to do is divide by area, I will get magnetic field density B, right. So I have a magnetic field B and I have a current around it, right. So what does Lorentz force tell us? These two will react and then will produce a force which is equal to, so there would be a force B L I sin phi. Now what is phi? The angle between the magnetic field vector and the current, right. What is phi here now? Magnetic field vector is going straight into the disc and the current is on the disc, so it is always 90 degrees. So I do not have to worry about, so this would be 1 sin 90, this would be 1, but I have two fluxes and two different currents, right. Let us look at those fluxes and currents. The to understand, it is better that we talk about phasors, right, because time varying quantities, drawing waveforms, understanding from those waveforms is complex. I assume the voltage given to the voltage coil is √2 V cos omega t and the current is equal to root 2 I cos omega t. I could have chosen the current to be cos omega t plus or minus theta, right, for a general load, but again understanding is very difficult. So let us understand what happens if the power factor is unity, then we can introduce power factor between the voltage and current, right. So if I look at it, I have the voltage phasor, I have the current phasor, both are cos omega t, so they are in the real axis. Now if I look at the flux due to the current, the flux due to the current so this would be the flux due to the current will be in phase with the current, right, and flux due to the voltage would be, if I have V cos omega t as the voltage, what would be the flux? It will be integral V, because d phi by dt has to be V, right. So phi would be integral V. So I will have minus sin omega t. Am I right? Right or wrong? If I integrate cos omega t, I will get sin omega t, right, not minus sin omega t. So my flux phi would be, what is the color I have used? Blue. This would be phi v. Okay. So now if this is the flux phi I, that would have an induced EMF on the disc, that would be d phi I by dt, right. So where will that be? The induced EMF due to this flux, it has to lead, right, by 90 degrees. So I will have induced EMF due to current I, right, and induced EMF due to the flux phi v would be EV, right, it has to lead that flux by 90 degrees. Okay. Now the moment I have the induced EMF here, the eddy currents would be induced EMF by the resistance of that path, right, one circular path. So the eddy currents, this would be I eddy current, I should not use these are all phasors, I would be on the same axis as induced EMF due to current I on the disc, right, because induced EMF divided by the resistance of the path of the disc would be. So if I look at, I will have I eddy current due to V, this is phasor EV, induced EMF due to the flux. Okay. Now if I look at, I have the current and the flux, right. If I look at the flux phi I will be in phase with the eddy current due to the voltage, right, and the flux phi v will be in line but opposite of phase with respect to the eddy current due to I, right. So if I look at, I have this flux phi v, it cannot interact with IEV because I have 90 degrees, right. If I have two phasors at 90 degrees, they would not produce an average value, right, 1 by t integral 0 to t sin omega t cos omega t is 0, right. So the voltage flux, the flux produced by the voltage coil cannot interact with the eddy current produced by itself and generate anything, it will not react. Similarly, the flux produced by the current I cannot interact, of course it will interact, but it will not produce any resultant quantity, the average value would be 0. So if I look at this way, the voltage coil flux will interact with the eddy current of current coil produced by the current coil, and current coil flux will interact with the eddy current of the voltage coil, right. And the net interaction would have some direction. Let me put this as the direction. We can actually look at the resultant vector, right, and then find out for which direction of flux, which direction of the eddy current this would happen. Okay. Now if I look at this, this would happen only between IEV and phi I and IEI and phi V. This is 1, this is 2. Let me put this in a different color. This and this will interact, and this and this will interact, and that will produce a torque, right. The average value of the torque would be the average value of these two things, and the average value would be 1 by t integral 0 to t, phi I is produced by I, there will be some constant depending upon the number of turns and so on, right. So I will put that as a constant, k1 times I, k2 times V dt, that is the average force produced by these two reactions, right. The flux of the voltage coil interacting with the eddy current of the current coil, and the flux of the current coil interacting with the eddy current of the voltage coil. So let us not worry about k1 and k2, we will see later what these k1 and k2 are. And I see now a force is produced on the disc, right, because of this eddy currents interacting with the fluxes, right. And this force, if I pivot this at the center, the disc will start rotating the disc, right. If I do nothing, the disc will start accumulating speed, right, it will slowly keep increasing its speed and finally go to infinity and fly away, right. So what we do is, in order to counteract this, we simply put a permanent magnet on the disc, right. So the disc is somewhere here, and we have phi m going through the disc due to the permanent magnet. So I have a disc like this, I have put a permanent magnet like this, right, the disc rotates in between. As long as the disc is stationary, the flux simply goes through the aluminum disc, right. Once the aluminum disc starts moving, what is going to happen? I have a conductor now cutting the flux, right. Whenever a conductor cuts the flux, there will be induced EMF. So there will be induced EMF if this rotates, the disc rotates in this direction, there will be an induced EMF in this direction. And when I have an induced EMF on a conductor, what is going to happen again? There would be eddy currents, right, there would be eddy currents because there is a voltage and there is a short circuit, right. So the current now would be such that it will oppose the movement of the disc, right. Many of us who would have used the DC motors, right, when you try to rotate against the magnetic poles, you will see that you have an opposition for movement, right. The same thing happens here when the DC flux is cut by the moving disc, it creates a magnetic an opposing force. that force would be proportional to, so there is going to be, this is force due to I comma V, right, and there will be an opposing force, this would be force due to the permanent magnet flux, right, and the speed of rotation of the disc. If the disc starts rotating higher and higher, the force will become higher and higher. So now I have two forces acting on the disc. One force is due to the product of IV, the integral of product of I and V. The other force is, so this is one force, this is, I call it as propelling force, and there is a compensating force, I call it as Fc, right, that comes, that is proportional to some k3 times the permanent magnetic flux density B into the angular speed omega, right. So now what will happen, initially this force will be large and this will be 0, when omega is 0 the compensating force is 0 and the propulsion force will be full, right, and the disc will start rotating. As the disc acquires speed, this force also will start increasing, right, and when this force reaches or equals this force, what will happen, they will compensate for each other and it will, the disc will run at a constant speed. So now I can write the speed of the disc to be so I can write omega is equal to some k4 times 1 by t integral 0 to t V I dt, or the speed of the disc we see is proportional to the power, right. I once again tell you all this k1, k2, k3 we will look at it little later, right. It all depends upon the geometry, it depends upon the resistivity of the aluminum disc, right, and the flux produced by the coils, and that depends upon the number of turns in the current coil, number of turns in the potential coil and so on. So we are now here only to understand the principle of operation. So the principle of operation is that we have now a mechanism by using a current coil and a potential coil and a permanent magnet, make a disc rotate at a particular speed where the speed is proportional to power. Now we have already said that if I put a counter on this disc, the counter gives me integral of the speed of the disc, right. Now the count value, if I look at both, the count would be integral of the speed of the disc, right, and we already know that the speed is integral of W, speed is proportional to what the power, right, Vi, integral Vi. So now I get the count is equal to integral of power, which is nothing but energy. So the count value would give me the energy consumed if I have that voltage and that current in my circuit. Okay. So if I want to connect the energy meter to measure the energy in a load, energy consumed by the load, I have the current coil, so I connect this is my energy meter. Induction type energy meter. So this is the current coil, this is the voltage coil. Please note, unlike the wattmeter, we do not have a resistance in series with the potential coil, right. The potential coil straight away takes the voltage and the current coil takes the current, and we simply count the number of rotation of the disc, and that rotation we know is proportional to the energy, right. So obviously the final output is a count, right, and this count is going to reflect the energy, right. Energy we already said will be in terms of units of electrical energy, 3600 kilojoules, right. So if I look at a typical energy meter, it may be 230 volts, 5 ampere, 50 hertz, which means I can apply 230 volts to the voltage coil, I can send maximum of 5 amperes to my current coil of the energy meter, and the frequency for which it is designed is 50 hertz, and the last one would be, let us say, 120 revolutions per kilowatt hour, right. If I now put this meter and start drawing 1000 watts, 1 kilowatt for 1 hour, it will run 120 revolutions of the disc, that is what it means, right, because we know the number of revolutions is proportional to the power, right. So a typical specification for an energy meter is 230 volts, 5 amperes, 50 hertz, 230 revolutions per kilowatt hour, okay. The induction type energy meter, because a magnetic induction has to occur, will work if and only if my voltage and currents are AC, right. Induction type energy meter will not work on DC. Now let us look at the deviations when we make a practical meter. I said this is the voltage phasor and this is the flux produced by the voltage phasor. In a practical coil this is not true, right, because this is true if my coil is a perfect inductor, right. A practical coil will not be a perfect inductor, it will have a winding resistance, right. So if I look at the practical voltage coil, I may have, this would be 5V practical coil, I will call it as Vp, okay. So now I know that I am not going to have this nice integral k1 k2 into I into V dt, because it is not 90 degrees, right. So I have to do something to rectify this problem in a practical sense. I must get a flux which is 90 degrees to the voltage, right. So what people have very intelligently done is that they put a shunt path, right, they put a shunt path. Now I show only that portion. So I have the voltage coil magnetic circuit, right, and then I put a shunt path here. So if this is the total, this is phi Vp practical and some part of it phi shunt does not go through the disc, right, does not go through the disc, and some part goes through the disc. So this will be phi disc and this will be phi shunt, right. In fact I have to make this here and put a coil here, right. This is, I apply voltage, okay. Now if I look at the phi Vp, it is split into two components. One component is the shunt flux and the other component is the disk flux, right. These two must add up to the total flux produced by the voltage coil. Now immediately we have seen that I can adjust the shunt flux such that my voltage, the flux through the disk is exactly 90 degrees, right, exactly 90 degrees. In this process I may not have the full voltage flux going through the disk, but I will have a part of the voltage flux going to the disk, but I ensure 90 degrees between the voltage applied and the flux, okay. So you will have this shunt flux, we will have a small screw here which the manufacturer will adjust so that he can control the shunt flux to get 90 degrees, right. We stop here, we will continue in the next class.